the bride the king would not touch. The night Emma arrived at Viremont Castle, the air smelled like wet stone and winter roses, and the torches along the bridge flickered as if they were nervous. Her carriage wheels clicked over the ancient wood, and every sound felt too loud, like the castle was listening. Emma held her cloak tight, pretending she wasn't afraid because her father had kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're brave, my girl, braver than anyone I know." She wanted to believe him. She really did. Inside, the great hall glowed with candlelight, gold and amber against black marble. The guests were elegant and quiet, the way people get when they're not sure whether to celebrate or survive. A string quartet played softly, but even the music sounded careful, like it didn't want to wake something sleeping under the floor. Emma lifted her chin as she walked forward, not because she felt fearless, but because she refused to be small. At the far end of the hall stood the vampire king. Lucien wore a dark coat with silver stitching, his hair pulled back, his posture perfectly straight. He looked young, too young for the age people whispered about, yet his eyes carried centuries of tiredness. When Emma met his gaze, she expected coldness, hunger, cruelty. Instead, she saw pain, controlled, disciplined, and hidden behind a calm mask. He stepped down from the dais and stopped at a respectful distance, not close enough to touch. The priest began the vows, voice trembling, and Emma waited for the king's hand to take hers. But Lucien didn't reach out. The hall held its breath. When the moment came for the seal of marriage, Lucien's jaw tightened as if he were swallowing something sharp. He looked at Emma like a man asking forgiveness without speaking. Then, in a voice so low only she could hear, he said, "I will honor you, I will protect you, but I will not claim you." Emma blinked, heat rushing into her face. "Not claim you." The words landed like a slap made of ice. The guests murmured. Someone laughed nervously, as if it were a misunderstanding that would be corrected in a second. But Lucien didn't correct it. He turned slightly toward the priest and said, clearly this time, "The vows stand. The rest does not." Emma stood frozen, her hands clenched so tightly beneath her sleeves her fingers hurt. She had prepared for 100 humiliations on this night, being treated like a bargain, a trophy, a pawn. She had not prepared for rejection from a man who looked like he was rejecting himself. After the ceremony ended in confused silence, Lucien escorted her through a corridor lit with blue-flamed lamps. The castle smelled of old books, wax, and something faintly sweet, like night-blooming jasmine. Their footsteps echoed as if the walls were repeating every unsaid thought. "You don't want this marriage," Emma finally said, keeping her voice steady. Lucien's gaze flickered toward her, then away. "Want is not the matter." "Then what is?" she pressed. He stopped in front of a carved door that led to a suite prepared for a queen, velvet curtains, soft rugs, a hearth already lit. Luxuries arranged with care, as if someone had tried to guess what comfort looks like for a human heart. Lucien didn't enter. He remained on the threshold, like a guard who refused to cross into warmth. "I promised your father you would be safe," he said. "That is the only promise I will not break." Emma stared at him. "Safe from what? From you?" His expression tightened, not anger, not offense, fear. Real fear worn under his calm like a hidden wound. "You think I'm punishing you," Lucien said quietly, "but I'm sparing you." Emma's throat tightened. "From what you are." He hesitated, and in that hesitation Emma heard the truth. Not what, but who. A man who carried something inside himself he didn't trust. Before she could speak again, a small blur of movement came skidding across the polished floor. A bat tiny, clearly inexperienced, crashed into a curtain, got tangled, and squeaked in outrage. Emma gasped, then couldn't help it, she laughed. A real laugh, bright and surprised, the kind that escaped before fear could stop it. Lucien's eyes snapped toward the bat. His lips pressed together, as if he was holding back, something almost like a smile. Almost. Emma walked over and gently freed the bat, speaking softly as if it were a clumsy pet. "You're dramatic, aren't you?" The bat squeaked again then, without warning, shifted. Not into something frightening, but into a young boy in a too-big servant's coat, rubbing his head like he'd just bumped it on the world. "Oh no," the boy whispered. Oh no, your majesty is going to feed me to the wolves." "There are no wolves in the castle," Emma said, trying not to laugh again. The boy pointed shakily toward Lucien. "There is him." Lucien's voice was sharp but not cruel. "Milo." Milo stood straighter immediately, still pale with embarrassment. "I was practicing, sire. I nearly had it. I only crashed because the curtain attacked me." Emma looked at Lucien, expecting fury. But Lucien didn't strike. He didn't threaten. He didn't even raise his voice again. He simply sighed, a tired sound that belonged to someone who had been carrying responsibility for too long. "Go to the library and stop turning into wildlife indoors." Milo's eyes widened. "That's it, no punishment." Lucien's gaze softened in a way that made Emma's chest ache. "You're learning. Learn without injuring yourself." Milo ran off, muttering. "The curtain started it," and his footsteps faded into the corridor. Silence returned, heavier than before. Emma looked back at the king. "You're kind to him." Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly, as if the word kind was a door he didn't want opened. "Kindness is not the same as closeness." Emma stepped nearer, careful, respectful, but determined. "Maybe closeness is what you're afraid of." For a moment, Lucien's control slipped. His gaze dropped to her throat, not in a hungry way, but in a haunted way, like a man staring at a cliff edge and remembering how easily someone can fall. Then he turned his face away, as if looking at her too long might break his vow. "You should sleep," he said. "The castle is strange at first, but it will not harm you." Emma swallowed. "And you?" Lucien's voice became a whisper, rough with something he refused to name. "I am the harm I'm keeping away." He stepped backward into the corridor shadows, leaving her standing in a room full of warmth he would not share. Emma closed the door slowly, leaning her forehead against the wood for a moment. Her heart thudded hard, confused and angry and strangely sad for him. Across the room, the fire popped softly, and beyond the window the moon hung like a pale coin in a sky without end. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she would endure, because resilience is what humans do when they're trapped in someone else's destiny. But as she turned toward the bed, she noticed something on the pillow. A single black rose, freshly cut, its petals dusted with frost, and beneath it a folded note in elegant handwriting. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. Only 4 words were written there. "Please don't make me." Her breath caught. The candles flickered as if the castle itself had flinched, and somewhere far down the hall, a deep bell rang once, slow, warning, alive. Emma stared at the note, suddenly certain of one thing. Lucien wasn't refusing her because he didn't feel anything. He was refusing her because he felt too much, and something was coming that would test the promise he'd made. And in that moment, the door handle on her chamber began to turn, slowly, though she knew Lucien had already left. Emma backed away, heart racing as the latch clicked. Who would enter a queen's room in the first hour of her marriage, when the king himself had sworn to keep his distance? The door opened only a hand's width, and a cold draft slid into the room like a quiet warning. Emma's eyes jumped to the corridor, expecting a stranger, an enemy, or maybe the king returning with regret in his face. Instead, Milo slipped inside sideways, holding a silver tray much too big for him, trying to look serious while his knees trembled under the weight. The tray wobbled, a cup rattled, and Emma rushed forward to steady it before it could crash. Milo blinked at her. You're not screaming." "I was about to," Emma said, breathing out hard. But then you arrived with tea like a guilty raccoon. "Eh, what?" Milo asked, offended. "A very dramatic one," Emma replied, and for the first time since stepping into the castle, she felt her fear loosen its grip. Not because she trusted the place, but because something human had happened, clumsy, funny, ordinary. Milo lowered the tray onto a table and straightened his collar, trying to regain dignity. "I wasn't supposed to come. His Majesty said you should rest, but Madame Sable told me the new queen might need comfort." "Who is Madame Sable?" Emma asked. Milo's face tightened. "The king's advisor. She smiles with her mouth, not with her eyes." Emma looked at the tea. It smelled of mint and warm honey. Comfort, yes, but also a reminder that someone in this castle was always watching. "And the bell?" she asked. "It rang right after I found the note." Milo swallowed. "That bell isn't for time, it's for trouble." Emma's fingers closed around the folded paper on the bed, the king's 4 words still burning through her thoughts. "Please don't make me." She looked up at Milo. "Tell me what's happening." Milo shifted his weight. He wanted to be loyal. He also wanted to be safe. Those 2 desires wrestled across his face like a child tugged between parents. "I shouldn't." He told everyone not to speak of it. Emma stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Milo, I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to survive my own life. If there's danger, I deserve to know." Milo glanced at the door, then whispered, "There are rules in Viremont, old rules. The king keeps them like chains around his own hands." Emma listened, still and alert. "Once long ago," Milo continued, "there was a queen before you, a human queen. The court wanted an heir, someone who could unite the old bloodlines. They pushed him. They pushed her. They pushed until—" Milo stopped, eyes glassy, like he'd seen the end of that story too clearly. Emma's chest tightened. "Until what?" Milo's voice became barely audible. "Until the king lost control for one moment. Not because he wanted to hurt her, because he loved her and thought love meant taking. He never forgave himself." Emma felt her throat go dry. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. The way Milo spoke told her enough. Something had broken, and Lucien had been living inside that break ever since. "So he refuses me," Emma said slowly, "because he thinks closeness equals danger." Milo nodded quickly, relieved she understood. "He thinks he's saving you. He's been saving everyone for so long he forgot how to be saved." Emma stared at the fire, watching it breathe. The castle was not just dark stone and legends. It was a place built on restraint, like Lucien himself. And suddenly she saw him differently, not as a monster to fear, but as a man who had decided he would rather be lonely than risk becoming the villain of someone else's life. Milo cleared his throat, trying to sound official. "Anyway, I brought tea. Also this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. A thin ring of pale metal with a simple, carved crest. Not diamonds, not royalty in the human sense. Just a symbol. A promise. "What is it?" Emma asked. Milo looked miserable. "A vow ring. His Majesty had it made for you days ago. He told the jeweler to make it plain so you wouldn't feel like a prisoner wearing it." Emma's eyes stung. The tenderness of that detail hit her harder than any grand gesture. "He planned for my comfort," she whispered, "even while refusing me." Milo nodded. "That's how he is. He gives with one hand and pulls back with the other." Emma slipped the ring onto her finger. It was cool, but it warmed quickly, as if it wanted to belong. She imagined Lucien, alone somewhere in this enormous castle, choosing distance like it was a duty, not a desire. "Thank you," she told Milo. Milo's shoulders relaxed, then he gave her a quick, conspiratorial grin. "If you want to survive here, my queen, you should know 3 things." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Only 3. "Only 3, Milo said solemnly. First, the castle listens, don't insult it, it takes things personally. Emma almost laughed. Castles don't have feelings. Milo leaned in. This one does. Emma held his gaze, and the humor faded slightly. Second, Milo continued, never accept a gift from Madame Sable without asking what she wants in return. And third, Emma asked. Milo's face turned serious again. Never follow the singing. Emma's skin prickled. What singing? Milo's lips parted to answer, then he froze. His eyes flicked past Emma toward the window. The air changed as if the room had inhaled. A soft sound rose from outside, distant and sweet, like someone humming a lullaby under the moon. It was beautiful enough to make Emma's heart loosen. It was also wrong enough to make the back of her neck go cold. Milo grabbed her wrist with sudden urgency. Don't listen, please. Emma tried to pull away, confused. It's just... No, Milo hissed. It's not just anything, it's the Meyer choir. The humming grew clearer. It seemed to weave through the glass, through the stones, through the blood in Emma's ears. The melody carried a feeling, an invitation, a promise of peace. Emma's feet shifted forward before she realized she was moving. Milo tightened his grip, panicking. Emma, stop. I can't hold you if you... She blinked hard, trying to shake the sound off like water. Why is it calling me? Milo's face crumpled. Because you're human, because you're warm, because you're new. Emma's pulse raced. She forced herself to step back, away from the window, away from the song. The moment she did, the melody sharpened, almost irritated, like it didn't like being refused. Then the room went suddenly still, and the fire dimmed as if someone had pinched the flame. A shadow crossed the frosted window, tall and deliberate. Not a bird, not a servant, something that moved with purpose as if it knew Emma's name. Milo whispered, "They found out you're here." "Who are they?" Emma asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Milo's eyes shone with fear. The ones who want the king to stop resisting. The ones who think a queen is only valuable if she can be used. Emma's stomach turned, not with disgust but with dread. So this marriage wasn't just politics. It was a trap with many hands pulling at its strings. A knock came at the door. Polite, controlled. Then a woman's voice, smooth as silk and cold as moonlight. "My queen, I brought a blessing for your first night." Milo's grip on Emma's wrist tightened until it hurt. "Madame Sable," he mouthed. Emma looked at the door as the handle began to turn again, slow and confident. She could smell something under the mint tea now, an unfamiliar floral scent, sharp and medicinal, like a perfume meant to hide poison. Emma swallowed, lifting her chin the way she had in the great hall. "Milo," she whispered, "where is the king?" Milo's voice cracked. "He's in the lower chapel. He goes there when he thinks he might lose control. He prays like it will fix him." The latch clicked. Emma's heart hammered as the door started to open, and she realized the cruelest twist of all. Lucien had kept his distance to protect her from himself, but his distance might be the very thing that leaves her unprotected tonight. The door swung inward, and Madame Sable stepped into the room with a smile that did not reach her eyes, carrying a small silver vial that caught the candlelight like a secret. "Drink," she said gently, as if offering comfort. "It will help you sleep. It will also help you belong." Emma's fingers curled around the edge of the table, and she felt the vowing warm against her skin, as if warning her. Because in that moment, Emma understood. If she drank, she might become a tool in someone else's plan. If she refused, she might become a target. And somewhere far below, in a chapel of stone and silence, the vampire king was praying, unaware that the first real test of his promise had already arrived at Emma's door. Madame Sable stepped further into the room, and the scent of her perfume grew stronger, winter lilies and something metallic beneath, like a clean blade hidden under silk. She held the silver vial between two fingers as if it were a sacred thing, not a threat, and her smile stayed perfectly measured. Emma didn't take it. She didn't step back either. She simply looked at the vial the way a person looks at a locked door, trying to guess what's on the other side. "I don't drink anything I didn't ask for," Emma said, keeping her voice calm. Milo made a small sound of relief, then tried to hide behind a cough, like bravery embarrassed him. Madame Sable's eyes flicked to him, and the room chilled another degree. "Sweet boy," she said, still smiling. "Go back to the library. Adults are speaking." Milo swallowed and didn't move. Emma placed a steady hand on Milo's shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it landed like a shield. "He stays," Emma said. For the first time, Madame Sable's smile faltered, just a crack. "You're new to this castle, my queen. You don't yet understand how mercy works here." Emma's heart thumped hard, but she refused to let fear become her voice. "Then teach me with honesty. What is in that vial?" "A blessing," Madame Sable said smoothly. "A tradition, a calming draft to ease your first nights among us." Emma's gaze sharpened. "And it will make me belong," she repeated. "That's a strange way to describe tea." Madame Sable took another step, and Milo tensed like a cornered cat. "Belonging is not always comfortable at first," she purred, "but it is necessary." Emma felt the hum outside return, faint but persistent, as if the night itself was leaning closer to listen. The castle did feel alive, like Milo said, and in that living silence, Emma heard the truth beneath Madame Sable's careful words. This wasn't comfort, it was control. Emma reached slowly for the tray and lifted her cup of mint tea. Her hand didn't shake, though her insides were shaking. "If it's truly a blessing," she said, "then you drink it first. Show me." Milo's eyes widened. He looked at Emma like she'd just thrown a rope across a canyon. Madame Sable let out a soft laugh, as if Emma had told a childish joke. "Queens don't command advisors." Emma met her gaze. "In my father's house, anyone who offers medicine proves it's medicine. Otherwise, it's an insult disguised as courtesy." The advisor's eyes hardened. "You're bold for a bride the king refuses." The words were meant to sting, and they did. Emma felt the bruise in them, but she didn't let it change her posture. "He refuses me," she said quietly, "because he is trying to be good." Madame Sable tilted her head, like she was studying an interesting flaw. "Goodness," she murmured, "is a fragile costume on old hunger." Milo stepped in front of Emma before he could stop himself. "That's enough." Madame Sable's gaze dropped to Milo with cold amusement. "You're loyal," she said. "That can be trained out of you." Emma's jaw tightened. Something in her snapped into clarity, not rage, but purpose. She had been brought here like a piece on a board. Tonight, she would not be moved without choosing. She lifted the cup and took a small sip of her own tea, very deliberately, keeping her eyes on Madame Sable the entire time. "See," Emma said, "I'm capable of belonging without your vial." Madame Sable's nostrils flared. "Your Majesty," she said, voice silky again, "you are making a mistake." The humming outside grew louder, now unmistakable, soft voices woven into the melody, not quite words, but almost. It pulled at Emma's attention like a hand on her sleeve. Milo winced and covered his ears. Madame Sable's smile returned, satisfied. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly. "The Meyer choir, they come when a human heart is stubborn, they come to soften it." Emma's blood ran cold. "So you invited them?" "I didn't need to," Madame Sable said. "They were curious the moment you crossed the bridge. The king's little arrangement can't hide you forever." Emma turned toward the window. Frost bloomed in delicate ferns across the glass, spreading fast, as if the night was trying to crawl inside. The singing rose and fell, beautiful and wrong, promising rest, promising relief from fear. Emma felt her feet want to move again. Her mind flashed with tired images, her father's worried eyes, the long road to this castle, the loneliness waiting in every corridor. A part of her wanted to surrender to the song just to stop carrying her own courage. Then she felt the vow ring on her finger, cool, steady, like a reminder. He had it made plain, so you wouldn't feel like a prisoner. Lucien had given her dignity even while refusing her. He had tried, in his broken way, to be kind. Emma closed her eyes and breathed in, deep and slow, the way her mother had taught her as a child when storms rattled their windows. "Milo," she said, voice firm, "run to the lower chapel. Now, tell the king I need him, not as a monster, not as a ruler, as a man who promised to protect." Milo hesitated, terrified of disobeying protocol. Emma squeezed his shoulder. "This is courage," she whispered. "Do it." Milo nodded once, then darted out the door so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. His footsteps thudded down the corridor, swallowed by the castle. Madame Sable watched him go, then sighed as if disappointed in a pet. "Calling him will not help you," she said. "When the king is afraid, he hides behind prayer. He will not come." Emma's eyes burned. "He will," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure. Madame Sable raised the vial. "Drink," she said again, softer now, almost maternal. "And everything will be easier. You will stop fighting the castle. You will stop fighting your own fear. You will stop asking him to become what he hates." Emma stared at the vial, and for a dangerous second, the offer sounded like mercy. To stop being the brave girl, to stop holding her chin up, to stop carrying everyone's expectations on her ribs. Then a thought struck her, sharp and bright. Madame Sable didn't want Emma asleep. She wanted Emma changed, molded, silenced. Emma set her tea down and stepped closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "You know what's funny?" she said. Madame Sable blinked, caught off guard. "Funny." Emma nodded. "Everyone here thinks humans are fragile, but you forget what humans do when they're afraid. We talk. We ask, we learn, we endure. We make friends with the very things that terrify us." Madame Sable's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" Emma reached for the vial. Madame Sable's smile sharpened in triumph. "Good girl." But Emma didn't drink it. She twisted the cork, quick, decisive, and flung the contents into the hearth. The liquid hit the flames with a hiss, and the fire flashed an eerie green for half a second before roaring back to normal, angry and bright. The room filled with a bitter scent, like burned flowers. Madame Sable's composure finally broke. "You—" Her voice cut off as the castle bell rang again, loud and deep, as if the stones themselves were alarmed. Outside, the singing turned harsh, no longer sweet. The frost on the window cracked, spiderwebbing outward, and the glass trembled. Emma's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "Whatever that was," Emma said, voice trembling now but still strong, "it doesn't own me." Madame Sable's eyes flashed with something like satisfaction and fury together. "Then you will learn," she whispered. "You will learn what happens to queens who refuse the old order." The shadows near the window thickened, gathering like storm clouds. A cold wind pushed through the cracks, and the curtains lifted as if invisible hands were tugging them toward the glass. Emma backed up one step, then stopped. She refused to be dragged by panic. She scanned the room fast, looking for something, anything, that might help. Her gaze landed on a tall mirror framed in silver, placed near the wardrobe. The mirror's surface was strangely dull, like it didn't want to reflect too clearly. She remembered something her grandmother used to say about old houses. They hide doors in places you don't expect, because fear makes people creative. Emma grabbed the mirror's edge and shoved. It moved. Not easily, but enough. Behind it, a narrow passage yawned open, breathing out air that smelled of dust and old lavender. A servant's way, hidden for emergencies. Madame Sable noticed and lunged forward, her calm finally cracking into urgency. "Don't you dare!" Emma darted into the passage just as the room's candles blew out in one collective breath. Darkness slammed down, thick as velvet. The singing outside surged, now very close, like voices pressed to stone. Emma ran, one hand on the wall, the other protecting the ring on her finger as if it were a fragile promise. Her breath echoed. Her footsteps were the only proof she still existed. Behind her, Madame Sable's voice drifted into the passage, too calm again. "You can run through the castle," she called, "but the castle runs through you." Emma's lungs burned. She turned a corner and almost collided with a tall figure standing at the end of the passage, perfectly still. For a terrifying instant, she thought it was one of the choir, one of the things the song belonged to. Then she saw the silver stitching on a dark coat, the way the darkness seemed to step back from him out of habit. King Lucien. He stood there like a storm held in human form, eyes bright with controlled urgency. His face looked carved from restraint, but his hands were trembling slightly, as if he'd run faster than he wanted anyone to know. He looked at Emma's pale face, at the soot smell clinging to her hair, at the fear she hadn't let become surrender. And something in him broke open, not into violence but into honesty. "Emma," he said, her name sounding like a vow, "did she give you the draft?" "I burned it," Emma whispered. Lucien closed his eyes for a beat, as if fighting emotion, then opened them with a sharp inhale. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." "I wasn't alone," Emma said, thinking of Milo's shaking courage. "But I might be soon." The singing echoed faintly through the walls, searching. Lucien's jaw tightened. Madame Sable has crossed a line. Emma studied him, really studied him, and saw it. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid for her. He had been building distance like a dam, believing his love would flood and ruin everything. Now the castle itself had forced his hand. "You wrote me a note," Emma said, voice soft. "You begged me not to make you." Lucien's eyes darkened with shame. "Because if you ask me for closeness, I don't trust myself to refuse. And if I fail you, I will not survive what I become." Emma stepped forward until she was close enough to feel the cold of him, close enough to hear the steadiness he was trying to borrow from himself. "Lucien," she said, "I'm not asking you to fail your restraint. I'm asking you to stop punishing yourself." His throat worked as if words were too heavy. "You don't understand what I am." "I understand what you're choosing," Emma replied. "Kindness, even when it costs you, that's not weakness, that's courage." The singing spiked suddenly, loud enough that the stones seemed to vibrate. A whisper threaded through it, Emma's name, almost lovingly spoken. Lucien's head snapped toward the sound, and the air around him changed. Not dangerous, focused, protective, like a guard dog that refuses to bite unless it must. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, an old, worn key on a chain. He pressed it into Emma's palm. "This opens the sunrise room," he said. "It's the only chamber in Viremont designed for warmth. For humans, go there. Lock the door. Wait for me." Emma's fingers curled around the key. "And you?" Lucien's gaze flickered with something fierce and gentle at once. "I am going to end this, without becoming the monster they want." Emma's voice cracked. "You can't do it alone." Lucien looked at her ring, then at her eyes. "Then stand with me," he said quietly. "Not behind me, with me." Emma nodded. "Tell me what to do." Lucien took a slow breath, as if choosing humility over pride. "Trust me," he said. "And when you hear the choir call, don't answer it with fear. Answer it with your name, out loud, like you belong to yourself." Emma swallowed. "That's it." "That's everything," Lucien murmured. "They feed on the parts of you try to hide." A sound echoed from the passage behind Emma. Footsteps, unhurried, approaching with confidence. Madame Sable's silhouette appeared at the far end, framed by darkness like a painting of patience. "Well," she said pleasantly, "the king finally came out of his chapel." Lucien stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and the advisor. "Sable," he said, voice calm as stone, "leave." Madame Sable smiled. "Or what? You'll do what you always do, hold your hunger like a saint and let everyone else pay for your restraint." Lucien didn't flinch. He simply lifted his hand, palm outward, not as a threat but as a command. The passage lights, dim lanterns mounted at intervals, flared brighter as if answering him. The singing wavered, confused, pushed back by something older than it. Madame Sable's smile twitched. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Emma realized then, the king wasn't powerful because he could destroy. He was powerful because he could refuse. Lucien spoke softly, and yet the words seemed to press into the walls. "This castle is not your weapon," he said, "and this queen is not your offering." Madame Sable's eyes flashed. "A queen is a symbol," she snapped. "A womb for alliances, a leash for a king." Emma stepped beside Lucien, shoulder to shoulder. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I am not a leash," she said, "and I'm not a sacrifice." Madame Sable looked at Emma like she'd finally become interesting. "Then you'll break," she said, and began to hum. The same melody from outside, sweet, persuasive, poisonous in its beauty. The sound slid into Emma's thoughts like velvet. For a second, she saw herself sleeping, quiet, no longer fighting. She saw Lucien returning to his chapel, alone, relieved. She saw the castle continuing as it always had, cold, controlled, obedient to old rules. Emma's knees weakened. Lucien's hand hovered near hers, not touching, not claiming, just there, asking permission without words. Emma remembered his note, "Please don't make me." She understood it now. He wasn't begging to avoid love. He was begging to avoid becoming the kind of love that takes instead of gives. Emma lifted her chin and did what Lucien told her. She spoke her name, clear and steady over the humming. "Emma." The sound of it cut through the song like a bell of its own. Not louder, but truer. The humming faltered. Emma said it again, stronger. "Emma." The castle seemed to breathe in, as if recognizing her not as prey, but as a person. Madame Sable's face hardened. She tried to push the song harder, but the melody cracked around the edges, losing its hold. Lucien turned his head slightly, voice low. "Good," he murmured, and the pride in that single word felt like sunrise. Then he did something Emma didn't expect. He spoke, not to threaten Sable, but to confess. "I refused my wife for 7 years once," he said, voice carrying down the passage, heavy with truth. "Not because she was unworthy, because I was terrified of the moment I would be asked to love her in a way I didn't trust myself to manage." Madame Sable's eyes widened, the courtly mask slipping. She didn't want this story told. Secrets were her currency. Lucien continued, and every word sounded like a chain being set down. "My fear became a cage for everyone, for her, for me, for this castle." Emma's throat tightened as she listened. She didn't know that first queen, but she felt the echo of her loneliness like a draft in winter. Lucien's gaze lifted to Emma, and in it was humility so raw it hurt. "I will not repeat it," he said, "not with you." Madame Sable hissed, anger turning sharp. "Pretty words. Confession doesn't change blood." Lucien nodded once. "No," he agreed, "but choices do." He turned back to Sable. "You use the Meyer choir to force obedience. You will stop. Tonight." Madame Sable's smile returned, strained. "And if I do?" Lucien's voice remained gentle, which was somehow more frightening to her than fury. "Then you leave Viremont, and you never return." Madame Sable laughed, small, brittle. You would exile the advisor who kept your throne intact. Lucien's eyes stayed steady. My throne was never worth someone else's freedom. The silence that followed was so complete Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the castle settle, as if it approved of that sentence. Madame Sable's gaze flicked to Emma's ring. She seemed to weigh the room, the king, the castle itself, and for the first time she looked outnumbered. Her voice dropped. "You'll regret giving a human that much power," she said to Lucien. Lucien answered simply, "I regret not doing it sooner." Madame Sable's jaw tightened. The humming stopped. The singing outside faded like a tide pulled back. The frost on the passage stones began to melt, slow and reluctant. For a long moment she stood there, calculating. Then she bowed, too shallow to be respectful, too smooth to be sincere. "As you command, Your Majesty," she said, and glided away into the darkness, her footsteps quiet as lies. The pressure in the air lifted. Emma exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since arriving at the castle. Lucien didn't move for a second. Then he turned to Emma, and the fierceness in him softened into something almost fragile. "I'm sorry," he said. Emma's eyes stung. "For what?" "For leaving you to face the first night alone," he whispered. "For believing distance was the only way to be good." Emma looked at him, this immortal king who carried guilt like armor, and she made a choice as deliberate as burning that vial. "You can protect me," she said, "but you don't get to decide I'm too delicate to stand beside you." Lucien's lips parted slightly, as if he didn't know how to accept that kind of courage from someone else. Emma lifted her hand slowly, offering it, not demanding, not pleading, just offering. "May I?" Lucien stared at her hand as if it were the most dangerous, sacred thing in the world. His fingers hovered, trembling. Then he placed his hand in hers. He didn't grip tightly, he didn't pull, he didn't claim. He held her the way a man holds something precious when he has finally learned that love is not possession. It is responsibility. The castle around them seemed to quiet, as if it had been waiting for that lesson too. Lucien's voice dropped to a murmur. "I won't beg you to stay away from me anymore," he said. "But I will ask you to tell me the truth always. If you ever feel unsafe, if I ever frighten you, you say it, and I will step back." Emma squeezed his hand. "And if you ever feel like you're drowning in your own guilt," she said, "you tell me, and I'll remind you you're still choosing kindness." Lucien's eyes glimmered, not with hunger, not with menace, with relief. They walked together down the passage toward the sunrise room, the key cool in Emma's palm. As they moved, Emma heard a small scuffle behind them. Milo appeared, panting, hair wild, looking like he'd sprinted through half the castle and argued with every stair on the way. "I told him," Milo blurted. "I told him you needed him, and then I hid behind a tapestry for courage." Emma laughed, breathless and real. Even Lucien's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile he'd allowed himself all night. "You did well," Lucien said to Milo, and the boy practically grew an inch taller. In the sunrise room, a strange, gentle warmth lived in the stones. Pale crystals set into the ceiling caught the moonlight and scattered it like soft daylight. It wasn't morning, not truly, but it felt like a promise that morning could exist. Emma stepped inside and turned to Lucien. "Will you come in?" she asked. Lucien hesitated on the threshold again, out of old habit, old fear. Emma didn't push. She simply waited, steady and patient, giving him a kind of respect no one else in this castle seemed to offer. Lucien took one step forward. Then another. He entered the room. The emotional payoff didn't come in a dramatic kiss or a grand declaration. It came in something quieter and stronger. A king choosing healing over pride, and a young woman choosing courage without losing her tenderness. Lucien looked at Emma as if seeing the future for the first time. "For 7 years," he said softly, I thought love meant resisting myself until there was nothing left of me. Emma's voice was gentle. Love means becoming someone safe to be close to, she said, and you're already trying. Lucien swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. Then let me try with you, honestly. Emma nodded, one night at a time. Milo, sensing the room had become too serious for his own nerves, cleared his throat loudly. So, should I guard the door or turn into a chair? I can do chair now. I'm very good at chair. Emma let out a surprised laugh, and even Lucien's quiet smile finally showed itself. Small, real, and human. Door, Lucien said, voice warm with restrained amusement. Just be a door. Milo saluted dramatically and stood outside, muttering, Finally, a job that fits my skill set. Emma and Lucien stood in the soft glow, hands still joined. Outside, the last thread of the Meyer Choir's song faded into nothing. The castle didn't feel like it was listening hungrily anymore. It felt like it was listening hopefully. Lucien looked down at Emma's ring. That crest, he said, means freely given. Emma's eyes filled. Then we start there, she whispered. And in the quiet that followed, the vampire king, who had refused his wife out of fear of becoming a monster, finally did something braver than refusing. He stayed. Not to claim her, but to keep his promise, to face his darkness with humility, and to learn, with Emma's steady courage beside him, that kindness can be stronger than any curse. The night remained, but it no longer felt endless. It felt like the last page before dawn.